All right, thank you for your engaging conversations at your table groups. And as Tim said, we're running a bit ahead of schedule, which is fantastic in that what we'll do here before lunch is to actually take some of the individual questions that were out there for the presenters, either that came up during their talks individually or here afterward, to pose those. But I want then the other presenters to feel free then to chime in and respond. So these will be targeted specifically to Dr. Zhao, Dr. Hanushek, Dr. Waters. That might elicit some further conversation among them. And then after lunch, we'll enter the more formal structured panel discussion as we have had it scheduled. Eric was in line, and I cut him off. And so we're going to actually have Eric ask that first question. And this is one for Dr. Zhao.
Correct. I was hoping you could talk for just a moment about what we as educators can do to help foster creativity and innovation in education, and perhaps how technology and the changes we're seeing in technology might impact that.
Thank you. I asked him to ask that question. I paid him because they asked him to ask questions. I think right now in our schools, with all the purchase of technology, we're hoping technology can help, but it doesn't. I mean, like the smart boards is not necessarily smarter; it's just a dumb board. But it's what I would suggest. There are two things we're not using technology for. One is technology as a tool for creation, making products. Another is tool for connection. A lot of our technology today is still used for students as a tool to consume information, better consumers, so we can access Google, we can study our Common Core standards. By the way, I don't like most of the Common Core standard products. They basically make you a better robots to memorize. So that's what the technology, and we're using technology as data-driven system to hold everyone accountable. That's just horrible way of doing things. Technology is supposed to liberate us, allow us to make things cheaply, less expensive, and share. For example, 20 years ago, if you're going to have kids make a photojournalist book, that would be very costly. Today, with digital photography, with Twitter, with Facebook, you can share broadly. 30 years ago, if you want your students to write a personalized English story about how Denver became Denver, I don't know why that's interesting, but suppose it's interesting, you can seriously sell that to Chinese students who are studying English, personalized. So making things. Second thing is connection. Our schools traditionally have been very geographically bounded. So local community, isolated, procure, that's the problem. And today, even today's technology allows us to connect. Someone was talking about the Khan Academy. We have better than Khan Academy. Khan Academy is good, it's okay, but there's different things the connections. Students can access to foreign languages anytime. No school, no matter where you are, you're in the mountains there, you can have your students take any foreign language if they desire. Your students can take common courses with people together. So that's the global connection. Your campus can truly be globalized. Just one final thing. If you go to a website called OBA, O-B-A, world, W-O-R-L-D.net. That's the project I'm making. I'm basically allowing every school to sign on this cloud computing platform, allowing students, schools, teachers to offer classes to other people anywhere in the world, and they can exchange, students can make products for each other, make it authentic. So that's how I would think. Making, creating, and connecting, not just consuming information. Thank you.
So can I follow on a little bit to that? I think I have a slightly different view or a little twist on what Yong was saying. And that is, there's very little evidence that we know how to teach creativity, as far as I can tell. But one of the real advantages over the long run of the US has been that we reward creativity outside of schools. It's not in the schools. And if you sit where I do in Silicon Valley, I play squash with some of the undergraduates at Stanford, and a couple of years ago, one of my squash partners was graduating, and so I said, "Mark, what are you going to do?" And Mark says, "I'm going to start a business." I said, "Oh, that's interesting. What are you going to do?" He says, "Oh, I don't know that yet. I'm just going to start a business." And it's this sort of culture where he knows that there's an opportunity and he's going to be rewarded. And I think what Yong is saying is we want to make sure our schools don't kill that off, all of this part, but that's not where the strength comes from. The strength comes from the fact that our economy historically has offered more rewards for creativity, for innovation, has allowed people to move from one job to another and so forth in ways that other countries couldn't until recently. But now everybody is starting to see that there's advantages in that and duplicating it, so that China, which is one of the world's worst economies until 20 years ago, has lightened up a little bit and now rewards some of this innovation, and they're getting it.
Okay, great. We have another question from the audience. Dr. Glass.
Thank you. Well, and thanks, I think on behalf of everybody here for convening this wonderful event. It's really been a treat so far. Dr. Waters, the McKinsey & Company report that you referenced broke down systems that are improving into a developmental framework, so poor to fair to good to great to excellent. And I believe they make the point that the choices or policy decisions in each developmental continuum are different depending on the context. So much to Dr. Zhao's point, a policy that makes sense in Angola doesn't make sense for Iowa. I'd be interested in hearing from the three of you where you think the American education system is in that progression, and what are the commensurate right policies that we should be adopting as states and as a nation.
Since you mentioned my name, Jason, I'll start, but I know I won't finish. I'm not certain, the last part of your question, what the right policies are. It is clear that the policy infrastructure or the policy systems that exist are either going to enable or constrain growth along that continuum. And then especially when systems are at the place where they're ready to unleash greatness. Policies that smother or that constrain that obviously created their own limits to growth. I had a chance, just one of the districts that'll be featured this afternoon or tomorrow afternoon, Westfield, Washington from Indiana. Mark Keene is the superintendent. Mark shared with me at a break a piece of legislation that's working its way through the Indiana legislature right now. I'm certain to speak to this when he's on the program. Where districts that are high performing along that continuum are being empowered, if you will, or liberated with far more degrees of freedom because they have demonstrated their ability to deliver a high quality program consistently. And I'm just supposing that's evidence from the policy side to create an environment to unleash greatness in those systems that are ready for that. There are other systems in Indiana that aren't at that level, where prescriptions may be more appropriate until there's evidence that execution on standard procedures, if you will, on an instructional program that ensures high quality every day, every time for every kid. Till we get that right, we need to stay that course. So I think there's a differentiation here based on levels of performance. In our own work, we're pretty explicit about the idea of defining autonomy within a district based on performance of schools. Today, if we were doing that work again, we would add the word differentiate as well as define autonomy based on performance. And one of the criteria we would be using is whatever measures we've agreed in the system are measures of high quality instruction, right, or high quality delivery, as well as the results that we're monitoring as a result, or as part of that system. At the local level, it would be kind of replicating what at least somebody in the Indiana legislature is doing right now, and I think something that would be reflective of that at the federal level as well. There is no perfect policy, but I think it has to be differentiated based on performance. Part of what we'll do this afternoon with the panel that you're part of is come back to that question. I
agree with much that Tim just said. I think we're in the sort of good range, and we'd like to get great on the McKinsey scale. The set of policies that I would put out pick up on this. I think you have to have local decision making because local people both know their own capacity and their own demands that vary quite widely. I look at California with 1,000 different school districts ranging from Los Angeles Unified with 700,000 kids to, I think it's 30 districts with less than 50 total students in the district. And the idea of sitting in Sacramento and making decisions about what each district should do seems insane to me. But you can't have autonomy in my mind without accountability. And I think accountability has to go at all levels. It has to go at the district, the school, and the classroom level. And then you have to have incentives that promote the things that you care about, which to me, basic knowledge and achievement is one of the things that we really care about and know how to do in schools. And you have to have policies that align rewards along with how well they do in these areas. And so it all goes along with what Tim was saying. And I take one little footnote that's a little bit off question, but I wanted to reiterate the importance of leadership. I personally have done a lot of studying of the schools in Texas and was just recently looking at the effects of principals and finding out how important high quality principals are to performance. It just stunned me. And I've changed a lot of what I say from I used to just say teachers, and I really mean teachers and leaders and administrators that I've come to believe are extraordinarily important.
Well, I have to jump in this from a slightly different angle because I think I come from a culture which is very totalitarian and authoritarian culture. So I'm very suspicious of anybody or a group of people, no matter what authority they have, think they have the right answer for everybody else. So I'm suspicious of any attempts. And I think we all should check the sense of arrogance in us as adults, so-called experts, government officials trying to prescribe our life for others. So that's something we need to be very careful about and let us know best solutions. Now, what I think we're missing in this whole process is, number one, we have to have a lot more faith in our students to say they can learn and they want to learn. But we are not following that enough. After all, they come to school, they've done something. And the second thing, we also have this belief that certain types of parents don't want their kids to have a good education. I found this really annoying. I found this is almost ironic. I was in Dubai, actually Abu Dhabi. People telling me, these kids don't want to learn because they're too wealthy. In America, these kids, they can't learn because they're too poor. So where's the kind of Goldilocks line of just rich enough to want to learn? I believe human beings are fundamentally motivated to learn. What they want to learn may not be what we think that they should learn. We just think about that. So by the same token, in terms of governance and policy, I fundamentally believe individual school boards, teachers, and principals want to do good. So it's not as much about holding them accountable, but how do you invite them to innovation, how to encourage and support them. I've written from a British model called mass localism. I really believe that local can do a lot more, especially with the connection of technology, than great. But I think the government can do a lot. But for me, the best thing the federal government, state government do is to equalize funding opportunities. Because if it's local, central and locally controlled, we're selfish in trying to get the best. We want for our own children. But I think government needs to go there, the Brown versus Board of Education. It's great. That's neat federal government intervention, but not in terms of what children learn, how they prescribe. Another thing I want to come back to talk a little bit about really, the same thing about borrowing from other countries. I agree. We want to be the best school in the world. That school actually is in the U.S., not in Shanghai. You go to Shanghai, nobody will believe that Shanghai wants to buy American school. There's one school called Shanghai American School, SAS. I've been there many times. The local government wants to copy it so much. They want to beg and try everything, but pay everything. If that's the case, Chinese people would not be sending their babies to America to study. I haven't yet sent Tom Friedman sent his kids to study in China, okay? If that's the case, I mean, we have this really silly, almost uninformed understanding, and which is almost an insult to the Chinese, basically because we admire things they absolutely hate. You know, so that's really just because culturally, it doesn't make sense there. So that's something I think we want to be very careful when we learn from other countries. I generally don't want to think we should learn from other countries. Even China will learn from America to a certain degree because context-wise it's so different. So international collaboration, I mean, the more local you are, the more global you will become. We need to look hard at uniqueness, but not to be ignorant of other places. So that's my point is to say, so I think, Jason, just back to you. Iowa needs to be more Iowan, but not to be more like Denver. You can't have a beautiful building like this. You're flat. You can't get what you hear. So think differently. Thank you.
And I know I cut Eric off before inviting Tim to come up and speak, so I don't want to do that here. We'll delay our start to lunch by just a couple of moments. And a question out here?
I'll preface my question with the fact that I believe that we are running a 19th century system with 20th century accountability looking for 21st century skills. The question at our table came up, why are you here? And the answer that I would offer is goes back to the slide that you shared with the visual that talked about improvement and then innovation. And I believe if we're talking about improvement, we're trying to improve the system that we have, where we need to be moving forward and looking at where the innovation lies and what really I consider probably a revolution. And so I want to throw that question out as to you guys is what does that innovation look like? Because that's really what I want to walk away with from our time together.
Tim, do you want to take that first?
I'll start, only that here's what I was trying to represent with that graphic. One of the things that strikes us by the work that's going on at IHI is their approach to a disciplined approach to innovation on a schedule to develop a hypothesis about what's next. To prototype around the answers they're finding in real time and make decisions as opposed to a kind of random acts of innovation, right? They can consolidate the learning, they can decide what to pull in to become part of their more standard routines. As I look at what's emerging with individualized learning platforms, I don't pretend to have a vision of exactly what the learning-based paradigm approach looks like. But to get there and to do that in some kind of scale in a sustainable way, we have to be, I think, committed to working with leadership in the current system to see some hope on the other side of whatever this transition is to a new paradigm. Or the system's going to remain as recalcitrant as it's been. We will be stuck in a 19th century paradigm with 20th century accountability as we aspire to a 21st century system. We have to have, in my view, a disciplined approach to working with leaders and leadership, have that drive what we think about policy or what happens with policy, as well as how we incorporate what the new practices are moving forward into a new paradigm of schooling. So I don't have the answer. I think the process is really instrumental to the kind of heavy lift that's going to occur or associated with system transformation.
Dr. Zhao, Dr. Hanushek?
I actually don't think that there's one answer to that question. It goes along the lines that we're going to find that some schools do things extraordinarily different than other schools, and they do it just as well, equally as well. So my friend and colleague Sal Khan has an idea of the flipped classroom and teachers doing some things. That's not going to work every place. It's not going to transport all that well to some places. It will to others. It's actually much like the way I view teachers now. We ask the question, what makes a good teacher? And the answer is we have no idea. We have absolutely no idea. And the reason why I don't think we have an idea is that Yong and I may be effective teachers, to our classrooms, but we do things entirely differently. We present materials entirely differently. We motivate kids entirely differently. We have different structures to what we do, and yet we can get the same answer from very different starting points. And that's how I think of schools and the innovation, that some schools will innovate in very different ways than others, using technology, not using technology, building it around sports page calculations of batting averages or whatever. However, people do it in very different ways. We just have to encourage this, and I think it's along the lines of what Yong would say of sort of more local innovation, rather than trying to think we'll come up with the answer.
Well, I mean, I think that's the simple point is this. Number one, we need to keep the goal clear that keep the kids out of a basement. Number two, we need to understand human nature drive us to acknowledge individual diversity, either culturally or locally or genetic, somehow the difference. And then acknowledge that everybody tries to work hard and build upon that. Actually, it's fairly, I think it's fairly, we've seen it. It's right now our biggest problem, the model is that, as I said, is a traditional employee-oriented model. We need to expand to the what I call entrepreneur-oriented model. If you do that to follow, so you would stop. I know many of you, the Colorado folks, are Common Core lovers. Sorry about that, but I'm going back. The Common Core, again, is not bad as math and science, and people can dispute. I don't even care about this. The fundamental thing, it constrains our freedom to innovate. It constrains, put our resources in there. Then you couple that with the common assessment, which with high stakes. I've seen too many cases, inevitable. It is inevitable. You're going to narrow the curriculum. You're going to deprive some children of proper education. So what I would go home, first and scratch the Common Core. Say Colorado doesn't belong to the union anymore. Secede from the union. That's first. Second thing, I would build a strength profile. Ask students to say, what might they be interested in? They may not know, but they can work towards that. At least they learn what they're not good at. Then let them fail early, begin the projects, and try to connect all those things. There are different models. I want to end by saying something. Many people like Thomas Friedman is a China lover. Many years ago, he would be called a kind of a panda hacker or whatever. He would have been seriously. He adores totalitarianism. China is totalitarianism. Think of this one. He admits, China has the longest highways, high-speed rail. It's true. But that's happened to have a benevolent kind of a corrupted government who wants to build it. It has nothing to do with what they have. It's very dangerous. Now we are bashing democracy in the U.S. I know Congress ranks below Kim Kardashian. That's dangerous. However, we are still thinking about, I want to paraphrase Winston Churchill, right? Democracy is the worst form of government except all others that have been tried. I would like to say American education may have some of the gist of the worst education except all others that have been tried. We have to go back local, trust individual teachers, students, parents, and the leaders.
And with that, that will be our note to head into lunch. Let's thank our three speakers from this morning and their input here. I didn't think we wanted to miss any of this ensuing panel discussion, the continuation of the conversation from this morning. Dr. Glass, I know we picked on you a couple times this morning. Rick picked on you this morning about where Iowa is with things. I'm going to paraphrase, and I hope that I was correct in this. You were with us in April, and when we were first talking about setting the conference up and the invited speakers, I think you said, well, this is a conference not to miss because of the fireworks that might ensue. And I think that was your language with that. Now, Dr. Zhao stood up and he said, well, he didn't want to be disagreeable or to disagree or not to disappoint. But let's see if now in this panel discussion we might just provoke a little bit more of this dialogue as we go with things, okay? And again, recognizing that we had some significant questions and comments that were posted on Twitter. And actually we're getting feeds from the outside too in responses to things. So I've written a couple of questions and prompts myself. We have a couple that actually I'll begin with from the tweets that came up. And then again, we have the mics there. I would encourage you to stand and ask your own questions and provoke the thinking further as we go. So Dan, down in front here with Littleton Public Schools. This was a question that probably is more specific to you, Dr. Hanushek, but then I think maybe some further conversation from the others. If it takes 20 years for schools to affect GDP, then why haven't the dire predictions of a nation at risk 34 years ago come to pass?
So the answer on what are the predictions, I have to be clear on this. The US economy is going to be fine into the future. We have a very strong economy. We've seen that since the 2008 recession, where the US has done better than most European and other countries. What I've suggested is that we would be much, much better off in the future than we will be if we could improve our schools. And so the nation at risk, I think, was good because it mobilized thinking about education and the importance of education. It was absolutely wrong in terms of his analysis. This is not a matter of higher unemployment rates, that if we don't get our schools together, unemployment will be down, or the recession of 2008 will be stronger. This is about the long-run growth, which is entirely separate in many ways than short-run business cycles that the nation at risk settled on. So I think we haven't seen that those predictions because the predictions were wrong. What I'm emphasizing, though, is that it's a different set of predictions that will determine the well-being, economic well-being at least, and maybe defense and other well-being of our kids and grandkids.
Can I add something to that? I think I would like to make a different prediction. Right now, I think if we continue down the so-called reform efforts with the common core, common assessment, we will see the decline of the U.S. in creativity, because it teaches people to be compliant, to become truly complacent and close-mindedness. We're not going to invite the people who is going to become new immigrants. We're talking about how important immigration is, open-mindedness. We are viewing ourselves as a second-rate country to compete with others who are trying to catch up to us. This is just completely, to me, is nonsensical. If you look at all this country, U.S. has been leading every domain. Then suddenly you are the front runner. Somebody comes up to you. You look back. You're trying to copy them. That just doesn't make sense at all. Now in the U.S., we're already seeing the prediction. If you look at our national system over the past 20 years, we've wasted precious opportunity to explore education innovations with technology. Don, I think you would agree that is the technology comes in. What do we turn them into? We turn them into more ways to force you to comply with the standards. Well, that's technology. We missed at least 10 years of great opportunity. We are directing our children into a very close-mindedness of global competitiveness without looking at others as opportunities. We're not equipping our children to function globally with foreign languages, global competency. We're thinking about this very basics. And then another thing is that we are basically right now, we have demoralized a lot of educators, great educators, getting out of the system, and we are, through the common core, common assessment, further segregate our schools through content, through man-made, manufactured standards, and you are not meeting this with. So my prediction, and if you look at some of the creativity assessment, we got last 2 years ago, Newsweek had an article called "The Creativity in Decline, Americans." I don't believe that that's a great measure, but it's divergent thinking. However, over the last 20 years, you see a decline that coincides with our emphasis on standards, on chasing after the accomplishment measured by test scores of a few subjects. If we don't reverse this, the reformers themselves have caused the most damage to our education than they're trying to solve the problem. So that's what my prediction. That's why. But by the way, I'm an American citizen now. I can always go back to China. It's all your problem. Yeah.
Jim, can I just follow up with Dr. Zhao? Please. I probably didn't see the end of the exchange, but I did track some of your exchange with Mark Tucker. Yes. On the Washington Post blog of last week or 10 days ago. And as he described, a writing assignment, right, a composition assignment. And as he articulated what would be translated into a standard,
Right.
and then his assertion, which I have to say I agreed with, didn't appear to constrain creativity. It wasn't about compliance. It was about guidance and what makes for the kind of writing, right, in this case, whether it would be analytical or storytelling, whatever the convention would be. I don't know if you responded to that or
I
not.
did. I love it, actually, Tim. Thanks for doing this. Again, is that the issue is that so much, right now, a lot of people are arguing the Common Core is about 21st century skills, it's about critical thinking, it's about this. But philosophically, no matter what you can do, it's an imposition from outside. It's a prescription on people. You should all do this in different places. For example, given any writing example, as a student, I may have no interest writing about, let's say, 49ers. I know some of you are great fans. I have no interest in Super Bowl. I really don't. But I have a fascination about people skiing down the hill. I will write about that, more interesting. So no matter what you teach, it's not driven by the individual. Another thing with the Common Core standards is that when you have two subjects, no matter whatever you claim, it's open, teachers can do whatever they like. Once you have high-stakes testing attached to it, from any country I've observed, from history, it's bound to go to narrow the curriculum to teach to the test. And we want them to teach to a test, and the test will not be able to test the kind of thinking we're talking about. So that's the issue is that, another, of course, more fundamentally, I have another issue is that I really believe education is about liberating people. Once you're liberated today, luckily, you are able to do it. But now, with this prescription, I don't believe a few people, I don't care how smart they are, few individuals can prescribe what all children can do in the future. Remember, this is not the first time, as Tim, we've done how many different standards now? If individual schools without a common prescription, if you so desire, you can teach the Singapore standards, Korean standards, Chinese standards. You don't need this stuff. Why do you need a Common Core taxpayer's dollar, my money, to force my children to learn something some other guys would prescribe? I don't believe that. That's the fundamental issue. I'm in the right state now for that reason, right?
So I have to provide a little bit of balance to that. I think that's a little bit unbalanced in that I remain somebody who thinks that accountability is an important element of this and measured performance on tests. What historically we did was have schools that served some people well, like yours and my kids, and not all kids. And one of the things that accountability has done is to try to broaden who is served well. I think that you can, in fact, develop tests and accountability systems and so forth that don't squeeze out all original thinking and all love of knowledge and so forth. Most of us have existed with tests for a long time and still have a love for these things. And so I think that my balance would have more on the accountability and measured performance side and incentives related to that, and not the free form, because it just doesn't happen everywhere.
Can I come back again? This is a good point. Or do I have to stop now?
No, I think
I have
the
an answer
point
for
counterpoint
everything.
is great. We'll continue with this.
No, I want to come because I think public schools have to be held accountable. Equity is a big concern for me. But I think it's equity in opportunity, not so-called equity in outcome necessarily. Because as we know, is that student backgrounds and socio-economic status do affect their achievement. It's, again, like I said, when we say teacher performance, we're not testing the teacher, we're testing the students. We're not testing the school, we're testing the kids. So they come to school, we don't have much time. I think use that accountability to lay a big burden on trying to force the least powerful group of people, teachers, to change the most persistent social problem is unfair. But second, most important is that when you bring those things, come to school, accountability itself, it hasn't worked. No Child Left Behind hasn't worked. In other places, it hasn't worked. Look at the gap hasn't been narrowed. If you look at of the new data will show, most schools have to sacrifice narrowing the curriculum to teach to the tests. And I agree, there may be some tests who don't discourage people to be creative, but maybe your home family environment has already balanced that. But from what I observe in the East Asian countries, That hasn't happened, So what I'm really worried about is that accountability should perhaps be at a different level. I would say opportunity accountability, fiscally should be more balanced and more equal in those things. But I think in terms of content, today, especially today, we should perhaps be left to a lot more professional autonomy.
So unless you want to discount completely any measured performance, you have to believe that No Child Left Behind has had a positive impact, because performance, at least through 8th grade, has gone up over the time of NCLB.
Well, that's actually, but many people say that's kind of debatable. People would argue different things. They would argue, depends on what measures. If you look at Texas, or look at national, if you look at some of the data, again, how long they're going to last, the volatile data. I mean, look at in the U.S., again, they were talking about merits of No Child Left Behind now, is that over the past 12 years now, right? 12 years now, you look at how many people said actually the gap narrowed, right, slower than the gap, before No Child Left Behind.
I don't think that's true. But I was looking at NAEP performance. If you believe that the national assessment measures something that we care about, we've done better over this time. Now, I think that the other thing about No Child Left Behind, I mean, it's a horrible way to run accountability. I mean, I'm not standing up for No Child Left Behind, but given that it's so bad and has led to improvements, that's part of the argument.
First, I'm not sure how long the improvements can sustain. Second of all, if you look at any of the data, how many schools have narrowed the curriculum? If you are basically just by simply increasing more time, taking student lunch time to teach you how to take the test, I'm actually surprised it improved a little, in that sense. So if you import a Chinese teacher to do it, they will do it much faster, actually, I think. So actually, I think No Child Left Behind has, I look at the sacrifice. When I look at the example of No Child Left Behind, I look at how it has, I think about 60% of schools have narrowed the curriculum, and we have sacrificed a lot more arts, music, sports recess for that. So that's where I think the opportunity themselves we may have lost a few Lady Gagas in the process. Some may be happier for that, but but I think we may have. You never know. And another thing is about, of course, you look at the massive cheating scandals, all these negative consequences people have been talking about, under how it corrupted our public system. So I think overall, we need to have another 3 days to talk about this, this 3 minutes we have.
So I do want to just weigh in. The conversation feels a little bit like it's standards or no standards, as opposed to, we've all seen the effects of a system absent standards and how that plays out, especially for, you talk about the least powerful in the system is to be teachers, the least powerful in the system to be students, right? Where standards are created based on assumptions for children, based on assumptions people make about kids as they walk through the door. So either the absence of standards or standards that vary dramatically for one group versus another. From our perspective, it's not a matter of either or. I'm not convinced that having standards means that it constrains or limits creativity. In fact, it's a good place to start, right? To make certain that the requisite skills are developed, that then we foster or support or scaffold the kind of extension of learning and inspire creativity. But it's got to start someplace. As a practical matter, we have the Common Core, and we're going to have the Common Core for a while. What happens with the assessment systems is another question. But we see lots of examples of starting with the Common Core, multiple pathways to demonstrating learning, and lots of examples of what I would consider creativity that started by clarity on what it is that we have to get right from the beginning. Right?
Well, I think like I said, I started, if the Common Core standards were not common or core, I would be for it. So that's the point. The point is that I'm not opposed to standards as guidelines, but I have trouble with the common, is that everybody has to be held against the same thing. That's just against human diversity. For example, I don't care. I have to confess to you, I am Chinese, but I am not good at math. That's the reason I began to learn English. Okay, that's how I avoid it. Because this is a real story. When I was going to college, 1982, China would allow you to opt out of math if you want to major in foreign languages. So my English wasn't good, but everybody was starting bad. So that's how I avoided it. So yes, if I was forced to take math as otherwise, I wouldn't be here. Basically, so that's the personal example to say, I think standards as guidelines, but that should not be gateways. Now we're using it as gateways. If you, like Arnie Duncan said, if you don't score this high in reading, you cannot go play basketball. I mean, God, and that would have happened to him. Probably wouldn't be our Secretary of Education, which may be a good thing, though. But, think about another thing is that the second part is that's the common part. Everybody do the same thing. The second is core. When you have a core and you have non-core, you have peripheral. As a school, American schools have always prided itself in breadth and flexibility. Now you have 2 core subjects supported by high-stakes testing. The rest, when the budget comes, what we drop the non-core subjects. We drop the non-core subjects, we're limiting, when we talk about civil rights issue, we're in essence creating a discrimination education system against other people who may otherwise want to pursue something else. So that's where the issue is. Standards are fine. People can be created, but common and core, using taxpayers' money with high-stakes testing, force everyone to do the same thing, that's the problem.
So to take an issue that there seemed to be some agreement on between you to begin, and let's see if then maybe the views diverge from that point. Both in the 2007 McKinsey & Company initial study of the best in the world systems and the follow-up on those that were on trajectories of improvement, it came down to the quality of teaching. OECD went one step further. The administrators of the PISA exam, Andreas Schleicher, was quoted as having said, improving the quality and reducing the variability in quality of teaching. How do you think we should go about improving the quality of teaching? And is there a role in reducing the variability in the quality of teaching?
Can I be even more controversial now? Since I'm going to be gone in 10 minutes, you can't find me anymore after that.
As long as you give me 3 minutes at the end.
Okay, so here's what I think. After looking at a lot of this international data, history, different countries, different things, I basically want to suggest that so far, by labeling those countries education successes, I have a problem with that. You're labeling them as better 19th century models. That's all. They're great as a 19th century model. If you want to build a 21st century model, there's nothing to learn from that. That's my stake. So teachers, for example. In the US now, as teacher education colleges, we're talking about NCTQ. We're trying to make standardized teacher education. Well, we're talking about complaining in the US, our teachers don't have enough content knowledge. So make sure they know a lot of content. But if you think about the future model, as I said before, technology has redefined what content means. Some of you are using Khan Academy, you're using different models. Just take math, as an example. No matter how good you are as a teacher, you can't diversify your teaching methods, know as much math as many other people that's available on the internet. So the question is, I think I would not focus on teacher content. I would focus on teacher as a motivator. The role of teachers changes is the organizer, is arrangement. It's more of a state manager. Bring the students to do different things. So that's one thing about teachers. Schools, the same way. We are still debating old issues, class size. But if you organize learning from student personalized learning, you don't have a class. That's a very different thinking. And instructional time, we're thinking about 5 hours, 10 hours, 9 hours. I think I like what Tim put up there. It's going to be a learning-based program. I was with Dick Elmore says that in 10 years, much learning will happen outside the institution, we call it. So I don't think there's much to learn from those success. Their success is based on, I would call those PISA, TIM, successful counts. They're basically successful taking the tests. Nothing more, nothing less. If you want to make better test takers, learn from them. If not, invent yourself. So that's what I said. Not trying to catch up, but to lead the way. So that's where I would say, reinvent your institution, but think about 2 major factors, technology and globalization. Those afford us a lot more opportunities. We haven't stopped and rethink. I hope McREL next year will, if I haven't offended you enough, bring me back. We can have a 2-day talk about how to reinvent our schools. Let's naturally global and take advantage of technology as creating tools and connecting tools.
Your 3 minutes?
So my 3 minutes. The reaction I have is that we have to focus on teachers today because we don't have the alternative delivery mechanisms in place and we don't know how to do them yet. We're doing a lot of experimentation with various uses of technology. We don't know how to use technology in the most effective way and how to integrate it into things. And so today what we have is the answer that the quality of teachers is decisive in many ways in determining what kids are learning at any point in time. On that line, I think part of your question was, well, what do we do? If we take that point of view, what do we do about it? The Holy Grail in this work has been to define what are the characteristics of a good teacher and then how do we prepare good teachers. And as the search for the Holy Grail has gone on, we haven't found it yet. This has been the most researched study in education or aspect of education research, and it hasn't been very successful. So for me, it comes down to allowing more people to come into teaching, frankly, not trying to put up barriers and restrict who gets into teaching, but then to be more serious about evaluating performance and being more clear about what it takes to stay in the teaching profession, which is just the opposite of what we've been doing. It comes down to a matter of how do you evaluate teachers in a fair and effective way, and then how do you use that information. Now, I think some districts have been working very hard, Denver being one, to try to figure out how to do that. I don't think they've solved the problem yet, but it's where we should be going. It's also where the teachers' union should be going, in my opinion, to be part of this evaluation in a constructive way as opposed to a negative way. Because if they don't do it, then you end up with the dozen states or so now where the legislature has just willy-nilly passed a law to say what evaluation should be for teachers, which I don't think is right either. So
Jim, just from our own perspective, we maybe we're naive here. We think we know something about what good teaching looks like, and how to improve the performance of classroom teachers. Different from the characteristics of a good teacher to what good instruction looks like. The whole idea of instruction probably fits more consistently in the 19th or 20th century paradigm of somebody standing up and delivering. And as we think about the future, more like managing learning as opposed to delivering instruction in a personalized experience. The fact of the matter is, most of the kids, at least in this country, are in the classrooms where teachers are delivering instruction. And we don't think it's a mystery about what good instruction looks like. Our research and the research of others on how does that translate into strategy. We don't think it's a mystery of, there's not much mystery about improving performance over time and reducing the variability from classroom to classroom. And evaluation, we think, is part of that, but it's just one part. There's a whole, what we heard earlier about the importance of coaching, not just students, but coaching adults. At the end of the day, we're not going to get better outcomes without better process. And we think we know something about the process in the current system, and we have to, in our view, the idea of innovation, and part of what we'll hear later, I guess we'll hear tomorrow more about from IHI, is a process for iterations of innovation. To think about what are the problems of practice that people are trying to overcome or solve right now. And what's a disciplined approach to innovation and iterations of innovation that allow us to learn fast, integrate the learning or assimilate the learning, flesh out the next phase or next stage of the hypothesis, and keep moving forward. At the end of the day, it's not like there's, in our view, it's not like there's another group of people waiting to come in to whatever the learning-based paradigm is going to be, fully prepared. We're going to have to learn our way forward to get there. And we're going to have to do a lot of that work with the people who are in the system now. And
would you think now the reform efforts we're implementing is hurting us from doing that, from cultivating autonomous, professional teachers, so wasting our money and political asset on doing that?
yeah, I don't think that's a yes or no question.
Oh, yeah, you have to give a yes or no.
No, this is not a yes or no question. There are many things, in our view, that are in the landscape now, in the reform initiatives, around which we think there's a lot to learn, right? And there's great promise. If I were gonna pick out positions to take around assessment and the effects of high-stakes testing, especially badly used, or evaluation systems badly used, I think we just have to be really clear on what we're talking.
What's the percentage of badly used systems? 80%?
Badly used.
Use in our current system of promoted reforms. I think, how many of you say bad tests? Like 80%, 70%? I'm basically trying to get you to agree with me that the so-called reforms over the past so many
Will you
years
come back
have
next
done
year
worse.
for that 2-day? If you'll come back next year for the 2-day conference, I might agree with you. But
Yes. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I go ahead with your question.
No, I was basically saying that, it is my belief that, yes, we all agree, I think, want the best education for America. Everybody wants it. The problem is that we don't think we know how to do it. So for me, as immigrant, I'm so familiar with other systems people are aspiring trying to get to, I just found it's just very sad, just to say this. And then I think the U.S., when I'm saying we're hurting this, we have to be very careful with short-term efficiency. Because education is a much long-term business, with value added, all those things. We can gain that efficiency like that. I think we should, as you were talking about, I try to distinguish between what I call instruction and education. I mean, instruction, you can measure. You can say, how fast I can make sure you memorize this 500 words this time. There are better methods, worse methods, but again, at what cost? Mm-hmm. When I memorize those things, I might have forgot something else. So I think that the way we deal with teachers, with schools, we should not make schools a good, efficient factory just to measure those outcomes. That's what the cognitive outcomes. So we agree. I mean, we don't want America to go down. What I am saying that there are different measures, different way of driving this. We need to broaden our scope and really value diversity as asset. That's what I would say. Yeah.
We've been talking about your two kids throughout the day here, and you walked into the school with your two kids. Did you have an opinion about whether you liked the teacher for your kids or not?
No.
No, you would, anything goes.
I'm serious. Yeah,
Anything
still,
goes.
if you ask any of our
There's
teachers,
not a person in this room who agrees with you
the
on
only
that.
problem I had,
There's not a person in this room.
I am serious. The only problem I had was No Child Left Behind. When that hit, because I knew a lot of her.
Because that was going to constrain a few of these teachers.
I didn't like it because all my kids. I'm serious. If you're asking my daughter, my son, I don't interfere. I don't in public teacher education. Actually, when they will say, okay, this teacher I don't like, I say, well, there's somebody you have to live with. Just you have a social contract. Somebody have to deal.
Be creative in how you deal
What?
with this person.
What's that?
Be creative in how
Exactly.
you deal with this teacher.
You have to deal with people you may not like. That's reality. That's social. That's life. And I actually talk to a lot of her teachers. I learned a lot from her teachers. The teacher, I never try to give suggestions. I like you or not. If you can ask all of them, that's really, I respect professional autonomy of teachers.
And if I could intervene, because we do have two folks that are in line. I think both of you back here? Just one? Okay, and I don't want to neglect our audience input here. We have about 7 minutes before they're up and running, so here we go.
So I hear agreement with you all that standards are important, but that they're not the only thing. And so if you take that adage, you measure what you value, or you only value what you measure. So to take it to the nuts and bolts, in Colorado we have the new standards, we have new assessments that are coming online, and we have the teacher evaluation system, which requires 50% of a teacher's performance to be based on some type of measure of student growth. So what advice would you give both to the test preparers or the people who are developing the test, but also districts about what should go in that 50% so that it captures both the kind of core standards, but also some of the other things that you're talking about? Because ultimately, I think it's the districts in the state who may be able to push the definitions a little bit.
So 2 minutes. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first because that'll set Young up.
Did you say set up or set off?
Set him up. I haven't looked at the new Colorado test, and I don't know the quality of these. And we've been operating with some horrid tests. I mean, they're just not up to what you'd want. They particularly don't measure things at the top end, broad, open thinking on questions, but there are ways to measure those things. And so I would emphasize basic knowledge for most of our accountability system on a broad set of measures. So I'd have good measures of math and reading and science at each grade level. I would actually go further, and so maybe I'll provoke Young on here. I have advocated having open tests, by which we make all of the test questions freely available and allow people to teach to them. This is what, for example, is done if you're taking a private pilot's test. To be a private pilot, you have to be able to land the plane, and there's a practical part to it. But there's a written part that there are 756 openly available questions that you will be tested on. You get a random set of 50 of these 756 questions for your test. The questions are vetted because they're openly available, and you get to the range of material that you want to cover, and you allow people to teach to this range of material, and then I would have that be what was tested and what people were evaluated on.
Well, actually, I would agree. That's a good idea, as long as you include more subjects, into it. So first, I mean, if I were right now, again, I want to say this. I think school districts should stand up on behalf of their students, because testing are harmful. You should really reject, boycott it. Like, learn from Garfield High School in Seattle. And there are some public schools, important students, unions, they're calling their students to boycott the tests. I don't think they are doing much good. You are enriching a lot of private companies, testing preparation. That data themselves is not very helpful. So number one, if you can, stand up to say, be a free state. And number two, I really view teachers, honestly, not as bureaucrats. You are, I mean, for me, I don't challenge teachers, reason, because I really believe every teacher is a human being in there who is trying to derive a good human experience with their students. No matter what they're trying to do, at least they are not hostile to my kids. I'm happy to have a kid who is hanging out with someone. That's what I think. Because children need to learn, deal with different kind of people. So teachers, I hope you will not use test scores to judge your students or judge yourself. So if I had any preference, what I would, if you go with my model of education, personalized curriculum, you would actually negotiate, work with your students and parents to say, by the year's end, what do you think, what product you want to make and why you are interested in that? You may be writing a novel, you may be doing a video, you may be writing a piece of music or writing a piece of software for math. So I would be more part of a personalized, outcome-based, performance-based action assessment in their own domain of choice, not by some other imposed. So that's where my preference.
And Tim?
Maybe the only, and I would respond entirely differently, just because we've been involved in the development of evaluation systems and trying to think through how to weight achievement or other productivity measures with observational measures and other artifacts. The question was framed around Colorado's 50% or whatever, 51%, is it 50%? 50%. I don't know that that's the right way to weight achievement. I don't know that it's not. But I do think there are lots of questions that we ought to now answer. If we're going to weight achievement at that level, and you're going to weight then the observational measures and artifacts or whatever goes with that, it sets up a wonderful opportunity to think about, so what do you want to learn as a result? What should we learn in Colorado? And how would we know whether or not that's the right weight of a productivity measure achievement or something else? Across the country, we were talking about this at lunchtime, there's a ton of time, effort, and money going into a question. And honestly, I'm not certain there's any evidence right now that 50% versus 20% versus any weight on a test score factored into computing an index of achievement yields, predicts better outcomes for kids. The measure of effective teaching, surveys and those kinds of things that factor into a growth model for teachers, we think real important. But if you're going to weight them, or you're going to weight achievement in the other variables, let's not stop there. Let's build a little R&D around that. Think of that as an R&D opportunity, not just as a policy solution or an intervention, but an opportunity to learn our way forward.
And that will be our last word. I guess we'll have to come back next year to continue the conversation. So he did. Doctors Hanushek, Zhao, Waters, let's thank them very much.